All right, so today we're diving deep into the life of Igor Kurchatov, a pretty important guy. You know, he's often called the father of the Soviet atomic bomb.
Right.
We've got some excerpts from a biography about him, and let me tell you,
Yeah.
this is not your typical scientist story.
No.
This guy's life, it's got everything, shipyards, super bombs, like
It is.
huge successes, but also some pretty dark moments.
Yeah, it's fascinating how someone with Kurchatov's early training, as a naval architect,
Oh, yeah.
you wouldn't think that would lead to, heading a nuclear program.
Right.
But both fields, when you think about it,
Yeah.
they require a deep understanding of complex systems. You've got engineering principles. It's all about problem solving on a massive scale.
But still, I mean, going from designing ships to, like, spearheading a top-secret project to build an atomic bomb, that's a heck of a leap.
It is, and you have to think, maybe that background gave him a different way of looking at things, a perspective that other physicists might not have had.
Yeah, maybe. And don't forget, this was the 1940s, like a time of crazy scientific advancements happening so fast.
Absolutely.
And Kurchatov basically had to teach himself nuclear physics.
On the fly, yeah.
Yeah, while also dealing with the pressure from the Soviet government.
Exactly. The pressure was immense. They were in a dead heat with the U.S.
Right. It was like a race against time to see who could build the bomb first.
Exactly.
So how did Kurchatov and his team catch it? Because the U.S. had a head start, right?
Well, Soviet intelligence played a huge role.
Ah, the spies.
Yeah, they managed to get their hands on some really critical information about the Manhattan Project, the U.S. program to build the bomb.
Wow.
And that intel allowed them to basically skip over some of the early research phases.
So they were taking shortcuts thanks to the spies.
You could say that. They even built a near-identical replica of the first American bomb.
Hold on, they just copied it.
The RDS-1, their first bomb, it was remarkably similar to the American Fat Man bomb.
Really? I mean, that's incredible, but also kind of cheating, isn't it?
Well, it raises all sorts of questions about, how the U.S. reacted to that, how knowledge travels even between enemies, especially during, a global conflict.
That's a whole other deep dive we could do.
Exactly.
But getting back to Kurchatov, so 1949 was a big year for him, right?
Huge year. You've got the successful test of the RDS-1.
Okay.
A massive victory for the Soviet Union. They officially entered the nuclear age.
So Kurchatov must have been relieved.
Oh, absolutely. You can imagine the pressure just lifted.
Yeah.
But then, that same year, you have the Chelyabinsk 40 accident.
Oh, right. The radiation disaster?
Yeah, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history.
And it happened in the same year they tested their first bomb.
It's almost, like a Greek tragedy or something.
Oh.
Like this huge triumph followed by this awful disaster.
Yeah, talk about a roller coaster of emotions.
And here's the thing. Information about Chelyabinsk 40 is still pretty scarce.
Why is that?
Well, as the Soviet Union, they kept things very hush-hush.
Makes sense.
But from what we're learning now, it might have been even worse than Chernobyl.
Really?
Yeah, in terms of radiation release, it was a major, major incident.
It really makes you think about the dangers these early pioneers were facing.
Absolutely. They were working with this incredibly powerful force, but they didn't fully understand the risks.
It's kind of like they were playing with fire, literally.
And in Kurchatov's case, he didn't just, direct things from a distance.
What do you mean?
After the accident at Chelyabinsk 40, he went into the damaged reactor hall himself.
Wow.
To try and contain the situation, putting himself at immense risk.
That's pretty heroic, but also maybe a little reckless.
Perhaps. But it shows how deeply he felt responsible.
Yeah, he must have been shaken by that experience.
You'd have to think so, seeing the devastating consequences firsthand.
Did it change his view on nuclear science?
It's hard to say for sure, but he did become a vocal advocate for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Oh yeah, he believed it could benefit humanity. And he was instrumental in developing the world's first nuclear power plant.
So from bombs to power plants.
Exactly. It opened in Abninsk in 1954, just 5 years after the bomb test.
That's a pretty quick turnaround.
It is. He wanted to prove that nuclear energy wasn't just about destruction.
Right. That it could be used for good.
Exactly. And the Abninsk power plant was proof of that.
Did he do anything else on the peaceful side of things?
He was also key in developing the nuclear-powered icebreaker, Lenin.
Wow, a nuclear-powered ship.
It was cutting-edge technology at the time.
That's amazing.
He really pushed the boundaries of what was possible with nuclear energy.
So we're seeing a more nuanced picture of Kurchatov emerge here.
Hmm.
Not just the father of the bomb, but someone wrestling with the ethical implications of his work.
That's what makes his story so fascinating, right?
Absolutely.
He's not just this brilliant scientist. He's also a complex individual grappling with these huge moral dilemmas.
Yeah. And all this is happening at a time when the world is on the brink of nuclear war.
It's a high-stakes story, for sure.
And speaking of interesting stories, you mentioned earlier that Kurchatov was known as the Beard.
Right.
So where did that nickname come from? I'm guessing it wasn't just because he had a beard.
Well, he did have a pretty impressive beard.
Yeah.
But the story goes that he vowed not to cut it until the Soviet atomic bomb was successful.
Wow, talk about dedication. So he kept this beard his whole life.
He did, and it became kind of his trademark.
I wonder if it became like a symbol for something bigger, you know?
Oh, possibly. Maybe his commitment to the project, or even Soviet science in general.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. So besides the beard, what else carries Kurchatov's name today?
Well, there are towns named after him. The Kurchatov Institute in Moscow.
Okay.
Even a crater on the moon.
Wow, his legacy is everywhere.
And his influence extends to his students, too. Many of them went on to make major contributions to science. Like Andrei Sakharov, the physicist and human rights activist.
Oh, right. He won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, he was one of Kurchatov's most famous students.
It's amazing how one man's work can lead to such a wide range of impacts.
It is, and Kurchatov himself, he was a dedicated communist, but later in his life, he became a strong voice against nuclear testing and for more collaboration with the West.
So the guy who built the Soviet bomb ends up advocating for peace.
It's a fascinating twist.
It sounds like we're only just scratching the surface of this guy's life.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to uncover.
Well, I'm definitely hooked.
Me too.
Kurchatov, he's a walking contradiction, a brilliant scientist, a dedicated communist, but also someone who saw the dangers of the nuclear age and tried to push for a more peaceful future.
And his story that raises all sorts of questions about the role of science.
Yeah.
The relationship between power and morality. It's a story that still resonates today.
All right, so that's it for part 1 of our deep dive into the life of Igor Kurchatov.
Great stuff.
Make sure you join us for part 2.
We'll be exploring the next chapter of this incredible story.
It's going to get even more interesting, trust me.
Absolutely.
See you then.
See ya.
So after that Chelyabinsk 40 accident, it's kind of surprising that Kurchatov didn't just, turn his back on nuclear science altogether.
Right. But instead, he almost doubled down on exploring the peaceful side of it.
Yeah, it's like he felt this responsibility.
Definitely a sense of responsibility.
To kind of steer things in a more positive direction.
And the fact that he pushed for international collaboration, in the middle of the Cold War.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable.
It seems almost counterintuitive, right?
It does. You'd expect more secrecy, more suspicion.
Yeah, especially from someone so high up in the Soviet system.
But in the late 1950s, Kurchatov actually went to England.
He did?
Yeah, and he gave these impassioned speeches about the need for Soviet and Western scientists to work together.
Wow.
Especially on nuclear fusion research. It was a bold move.
It really was. I mean, talk about trying to break down barriers.
Yeah, he was putting science above politics.
It makes you wonder what could have been achieved if more people had followed his lead.
Absolutely. It's hard to measure the impact he had.
Right.
But he definitely planted some seeds for future collaboration.
So Kurchatov's story, it's not just about bombs and spies.
Wow.
It's also about this individual's conviction, his courage to challenge the way things were done.
Exactly. Even in a system as rigid as the Soviet Union.
It shows that one person can make a difference.
Absolutely. Especially when they're advocating for a better future. A future where knowledge is shared and used responsibly.
And sadly, Kurchatov's life was cut short in 1960.
Way too young.
He was only 57.
It makes you wonder if the Chelyabinsk 40 accident played a role.
Yeah, that exposure to radiation couldn't have been good for his health.
No, but of course, there could have been other factors too.
Right, but his death, it's a reminder of the risks these pioneers were taking.
Absolutely. They were pushing the boundaries of science, but the dangers were real.
It's a shame he couldn't see more of the peaceful applications of nuclear energy come to fruition.
Yeah, he had such a vision for it.
But even in his relatively short life, he accomplished a lot.
He did. And his legacy is still debated today.
How so?
Well, some see him as a hero, the father of the Soviet bomb.
Right.
Others focus on the darker side, the dangers of the technology he helped create.
It's complex. He was a dedicated communist, but also someone who pushed for peace and collaboration.
He was a brilliant scientist, but also aware of the ethical dilemmas of his work.
It's like he embodied all these contradictions.
And that's what makes him so fascinating to study, right?
Totally. So what do you think? What's the big takeaway from Kurchatov's life?
For me, it's a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge, especially in fields like nuclear physics, it has to be balanced with a sense of responsibility.
Absolutely. And a commitment to ethical conduct.
Exactly. Because the consequences can be huge.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We have.
From the race to build the bomb to Kurchatov's vision for peaceful nuclear energy.
And his advocacy for international collaboration.
But it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to uncover, right?
That's the beauty of history. There's always another layer to peel back.
In Kurchatov's story, it's one that keeps resonating, even today.
How so?
Well, think about the ethical questions he wrestled with. The choices he made, they're still relevant in our world.
Yeah, like how do we balance scientific progress with responsibility?
Exactly. And what role should international cooperation play in tackling global challenges?
These are big questions.
They are, but Kurchatov's life shows us that they're worth asking.
All right, so I think it's safe to say we've learned a lot about Igor Kurchatov.
Definitely more than just the father of the bomb.
He was a complex figure, a product of his time, but also someone who tried to shape the future.
And his story, it's full of contradictions, but ultimately...
It's a reminder that individuals can make a difference, even in the face of overwhelming challenges.
I like that. A message of hope.
Exactly. Hope and responsibility.
You know, it's amazing how even all these years later, Kurchatov's story still feels so relevant.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the ethical questions he faced,
Right.
the choices he had to make, they resonate with what we're dealing with today.
And he was doing it all with the weight of the world on his shoulders, like literally father of the Soviet atomic bomb.
Exactly.
That's got to be a lot to carry around, knowing what that technology could do.
Yeah, and to his credit, he didn't shy away from any of it.
No.
He used his influence to advocate for a responsible approach to nuclear science.
Yeah, he really saw the bigger picture.
He did.
It wasn't just about making breakthroughs, it was about understanding the implications of those breakthroughs
Absolutely.
and then trying to guide things in a direction that would actually benefit humanity.
Which is a message we could all use a reminder of right now.
For sure. Especially now with all the new tech coming out, all these advancements.
Yeah, it can feel like we're moving so fast.
Roar.
And Kurchatov's story, it's a cautionary tale, but also a reminder that we have the power to make a difference.
Exactly. Progress without responsibility.
Wow. Yeah, that can lead to some pretty bad outcomes.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly, but he also shows us that even when things seem impossible,
Right.
individuals can step up and change the course of history.
Absolutely. So what do we take away from all this? What's the message for our listeners?
I think Kurchatov's legacy challenges us to think about how we can use our own knowledge and skills to make the world a better place, to create a more peaceful and sustainable future.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the life of Igor Kurchatov.
From shipyards to super bombs to advocating for peace.
Quite a journey.
It's been an incredible look into a really complex and fascinating figure.
He was a man of contradictions, for sure.
He was. But his story, it's a reminder that the past is never really past.
Yeah, what we do today, it shapes tomorrow.
And that the choices we make, they have consequences for generations to come.
I think Kurchatov would agree with that.
I think so, too. So if you're interested in learning more about Kurchatov and this whole era of nuclear history, definitely check out the resources we mentioned.
It's a fascinating period to explore.
And as you do keep Kurchatov's story in mind, think about the questions he faced, the challenges he overcame, and what his life can teach us about the power and responsibility of scientific discovery.
And the importance of working together to build a better future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.